Episode 3 of the Rat Chat with me, your host, Liam Nitis, our compatriots, Colin, also known as Flame Mango, and also David, also known as Deathwatch. And our topic for this week is going to be FPSs, or as one would know them as, first-person shooters. Alright, yeah. So, what do you guys? What are your opinions on first-person shooters?
I enjoy them. I think a lot of first-person shooters, I put them in two categories. I throw them into competitive ones and ones I would play just to like goof off and relax. Like Doom. Doom's a first-person that I'd like relax with. I'd just sit down, I'd play it.
I wouldn't say relax with, but I get
like,
you.
I would sit and just enjoy. I'm not trying to like do incredibly well like you can do.
Okay, yeah, I get what you mean.
Forcing myself to be good.
Yeah, okay.
Just there to have fun. Where then you have games like Valorant or Counter-Strike where you need to be like on point. You need to kind of like focus.
Yeah, I totally get it. So who do we want to start off this week? What's the batting order?
Started last week. Who started the first week?
I started the first week.
Colin?
Yep.
Start us off.
Hey! I got a host from your friend over here, Flame Mango. Thank you for the host.
Yeah, so my pick, probably lackluster and probably pretty obvious. I picked Valorant.
We do play it every week.
More specifically because it's the, well, also in true Colin fashion, I have another backup.
Oh, well, that's good.
We'll talk about in a moment. Mainly because Valorant is the one I've sunk the most amount of time into the last year, I think it's 9 months or so at this point, which is freaking insane. It's the one we have played once a week.
Definitely, yeah.
With few breaks for several months. And it's one that I was never really into the competitive shooter scene per se. Obviously I played, I was never really into competitive video games to begin with a whole lot. Even just competitive game modes in games, just never a huge fan of. And that changed slightly when I, started playing Overwatch on just like kind of a slightly competitive collegiate team.
Yeah.
Run through my club. And I wouldn't even, that is mostly FPS, but I would consider Valorant to be kind of the core. That and CSGO to be kind of the core.
Would we
Call of Duty to a certain extent as well as the core of the FPS genre?
Would we consider that a strategy game?
All right, we're not. I'm not touching that. Mainly because, like, I think we'll get into this distinction later, but there's skill-based FPS versus just FPS, which is I think a little bit what you and David were talking about a second ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Where Valorant is a game that I had really no business ever being like, oh yeah, I could probably do well in that game. Because my only experience with the game like that was CSGO, where I jumped in for, I think it was like 2.4 hours and just got my ass handed to me. Just got railed. Mainly because there's a certain mentality you have to have. Exactly. You have to have a certain mentality to go with that, with games like that. Where
Definitely.
You dying very quickly or just like repetitively or just kind of unexpectedly, you have to get used to that. And I think we are a good example of that. Specifically, it's not getting tilted, very important in these type of games. But especially with Valorant and CSGO, going into a match and you get headshot, not getting so you can be upset about it, but not being like, oh, I'm gonna ult F4, I'm out of here, I'm never gonna play this game again. Because as I think is very clear from both me and Liam's performance in the game, is that the more you play it, the better you're gonna be at it, and generally the more fun you're gonna have. So that's true. Valorant. We all know Valorant. We stream it every Wednesday.
Valorant Wednesday.
A game that maybe I know more about than maybe you guys. I don't know how much you guys have played. Is Titanfall series.
That's true.
I was gonna bring that one up. Yeah.
I do not. Let's get this out of the way first. I do not consider Apex Legends as part of the series. It is in a similar realm.
Are they?
A very different game.
I really enjoy Apex actually.
I'm not a huge battle royale guy.
I know that.
Play it. Yeah.
But so Titanfall, essentially, the reason I like it so much is because there's a lot of verticality to the game, very fast.
Yep.
You're kind of running around, running and gunning, which is my favorite type of game personally.
Mhm.
Which is why you see me play characters like Jet in Valorant. It's just it's like, I feel like I'm moving faster. I feel like can get around the map quicker instead of just
If
being
you
like,
could-
I'm gonna peek every single corner.
If you could only hit her ult, though.
I mean, yeah, if I could only use her ult, I would be an amazing Jetman.
Yeah.
And the other reason I like Titanfall is just when I saw gameplay of it for the first time, I was like, this is insane. Because mechs are incredible, and like we don't have enough mech games. Granted, we've got games like, I don't know, there's Gundam games, and I'm not
Gundam
into
games.
I don't know enough about them.
Oh.
That is a game genre that I have not touched. That is like, oh, like there's plenty of mech games. And I'm like, no. I'm talking about like Titanfall level mechs where you're doing battle and then you're just like, I'm gonna call in my mech, and it just like breaks the sound barrier, implodes into the ground, and then you're like, I'm gonna get in now. And then the get in sequences are cool. You ride on the back of them. Just there's so much to do in the game, and it looks really cool. And just like maybe the fantasy of it is what I'm in love with more so than Titanfall 2. Good game. I think they messed up the Titan classes a little bit in that game.
So
They messed things
Colin,
up.
if
Personally,
you
that's
want
my
to,
opinion.
I'm gonna derail this really quick.
Okay. Do it.
If you want to check out a cool Gundam game, there is a old GameCube game that I loved called Custom Robo. Like super freaking old school, like straight up so much fun to play.
Well, so that's the thing, right? Jump back like a month at this point.
Yeah.
Where we're talking about role-playing games. For me, the Gundam games, they're generally third person and sometimes they're top down. I don't know, whatever.
It was yeah.
Those are great, and I love bullet hell stuff, which I assume that is somewhat.
It's actually all third person. It's kind of bullet hell, but it's more like abilities and then shooting a little bit.
So that's like, as we talked about, with all of the role playing games. Just go watch that episode in the middle of this one. The reason I think I like Titanfall more than, say, a Gundam game is I don't think I'm as much in love with the idea of like, oh, mechs are cool, as more in like, oh, I really want to be Iron Man. And this is like maybe the closest right now, 2015 or whatever, that I'm going to get to that, where I not feel like it's not extremely immersive, but there is, all video games are immersive to a certain extent.
Certainly.
It's like, oh, my character am hopping in this mech and I am the one controlling it. And you get to, it's nice to be, the big heavy mech and just be like, oh, I'm just gonna, especially when there's, when you're the big mech and there's just a bunch of little people scurrying around, you're like, I am God, and you're just like,
so
and just clobbering people.
Funny callback. I was actually playing BioShock 2 recently, which is another great shooter game. Not on my list, but great game. You actually play as a Big Daddy in that game, and they're almost like mechs, but they're more like scuba diving mech people.
Yeah.
But yeah, you play as this perspective of a Big Daddy in that game, which is really interesting. You do kind of get the like appeal of like you are more powerful than people, but there's also like a counterbalance of this like superpower thing.
Well, so that's that's also like again, coming back to Gundam, right? Gundam, for the most part, they're pretty skinny, is kind of an interesting word to use, but they're kind of more lightweight. They can move around a bit more.
They're
Yeah.
more
very
like people
mobile.
than anything.
Exactly, compared to like a Titanfall mech or like a Big Daddy, where it's like, oh, you feel the weight.
Yeah, like you're clomping around.
You're not boosting around.
Yeah.
Like there are some classes in Titanfall where you're just like, you got more boosts.
I got more
and there's
boosts.
some that are heavier than others.
Yeah.
But like the mid-range mech is like the perfect one where it's like, yeah, you can take some damage, but you're essentially just like it's the next step tanks will take. And it's like a crossroads between like Transformers and like Pacific Rim.
I mean, yeah, you can also bring up like Iron Man. So I think
Exactly.
like almost so Big Daddies are more towards like Iron Man, how you're like you're a person almost just in like an exoskeleton, versus like a full on mech where you're like almost piloting it versus just having like an exoskeleton.
Well, and so that was in terms of like audience reception, people overhyped. There are several games I very much enjoy that people have overhyped heavily, and then the game has felt the wrath of it when it actually comes out. One of them being Watch Dogs. That's that's a different. Well, someday we'll talk about that.
I'm
But
sure.
Titanfall, people were really excited for. Just like I was super hyped for it. Even
Mhm.
though it originally I didn't like have an Xbox. I think it came out on Xbox first, I believe.
Yeah,
don't
I
actually
believe
know.
so. That's what I
Um,
got at least.
But
Yeah,
I was
I
super,
think it
I was
did.
super like, oh, this is gonna be great, and people were like, oh, this looks really cool. And the original first trailer for it, just look, maybe it wasn't a trailer, maybe it was just gameplay. Looked phenomenal. People were really excited for the game, and then when it came out, people were like, this sucks. And I was like, no, like, like some of the mechanics are, they've got a shotgun that can just literally destroy anybody. They've got a smart pistol, which
Mm.
essentially, if someone is
Game
in view
lock.
for more than 3 seconds, you kill them.
Yep.
Which are, there are flaws to the game, but all games have flaws. And to me, it's not, not the perfect game.
It's not
I
game
do-
breaking for you.
I like just the kind of the grunge and just a little bit of just like, this is like the future. Maybe it's not post-apocalyptic, but there's like warring space things.
Mhm.
And I would think that for me, in the future, the most like the coolest game I can imagine is like Star Citizen and this combined, where like you can have a mech, or like like maybe you're a bounty hunter and you've got a mech or something. Anyway, I've talked too much. Titanfall is a great game.
Yeah.
It is a great
Titanfall
game.
2 you should go look at. The reason I don't like Apex Legends is because they're like, so the best Titanfall, you guys really like the pilot part of that game, right? And you're like, no, we don't like that part. It's fun, but we like the big mechs part of it. And now they just have a game that's essentially that, except like with a different art style, which is fine. And I mean, it's a battle royale. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I personally enjoy Apex Legends just because it does have all the verticality of of obviously Titanfall, but it comes in with just a little bit of that like cartoonish, almost like cartoonish styling that I really do like, and I find it fun to have your character swing around, like use abilities, different things like that. Other than like in a very serious competitive game like CS:GO. Oh,
Is Colin gone?
he may have
Alright.
dropped.
Well, that's a great place because I was actually going to take over Titanfall because I had 2 this week.
Oh, cool.
Surprisingly, I was
Oh,
gonna pull
oh.
I was gonna pull Colin, and one of them, in fact, was Titanfall.
There's Colin back.
And so I fell in love with Titanfall when it first came out because I don't know if you guys ever played Mirror's Edge.
Oh yeah, love Mirror's
right.
Edge. Great game.
To me, it felt like it clashed that and a first-person shooter, which was just incredible. I loved the movement of being a pilot and running around and then just gaining a mech and destroying tiny humans. It was just a great feeling. So very glad Colin brought that up because before the stream, I was trying to figure out why I loved it so much. And then Colin mentioned the movement. I'm like, that I think is probably the thing that hinders me most in a lot of the competitive FPS games that we play is that there's one movement unless you're Jet or like
I would
Raids.
say in terms of movement, there's definitely and I guess in FPS to there's kind of a scale, right? So at the bottom of the scale for movement is something like CS:GO or Valorant, more CS:GO than Valorant, where you like there's jumping and that's about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? You can jump, you can fall off things, you can jump up things. That's
Weapon
basically
has a different speed.
slightly
that-
above CS:GO is Valorant, which is like certain characters have abilities that allow them to have
Boost
more
up,
verticality,
go
less verticality.
faster, that kind of thing.
Above
Yeah.
that, and maybe there's a game in between that we haven't mentioned yet. Above Valorant in that is Destiny, where there's jumping. You can jump higher with different attributes. You can fly. To a certain extent, if you're a warlock, there's different, there's different movement types.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
above that is Titanfall or Mirror's Edge, where you can, there's wall running, you jump over things, you can boost in the air. Just the most amount of
Pretty much
movement
any
compared to the least
surface is
amount of
pretty runnable.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I would also consider Mirror's Edge to be a very linear game.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
The second
Um,
one attempted to fix it, but I
What
didn't
about
enjoy it as much.
Catalyst?
Actually, I've never heard of Catalyst.
It's the third one.
Oh,
I
is
thought that was the
is there a
second one.
third
I thought
one?
Mirror's Edge Catalyst was the second one, Colin.
I may be mistaken then. I don't know
Oh,
enough about
I
Mirror's
thought-
Edge.
I
I'm pretty
didn't
sure
think there
Mirror's
was a
Edge
third one.
Catalyst is number 2.
Okay.
And they attempted to fix it with having an open world that you can go around, but it just felt very
Forced.
It felt chunkier than
Okay.
the original. Like the original did one thing incredibly well. and
Very
that was the
smooth.
movement.
Yeah.
The movement in that game is incredible, but the second
Yeah.
one was so chunky with everything.
Okay.
That's at least what I felt when I played it.
Well, to talk about a game that I personally think has some great movement would be Assassin's Creed 2. I thoroughly enjoyed that game for its movement and how fluid the combat can be, just like Mirror's Edge. But to go back to our topic on hand of FPSs, your pick for this week would be Mirror's Edge or Titanfall?
No, so I had Titanfall as my number 1, but
Gotcha.
of course Colin brought that up. But of
Colin
course my
around
second
it.
one had to have been Counter-Strike.
Oh yes.
As I've sunk over 1,000 hours into the game. I'm not gonna
Nice.
say how many, but over that.
I'm not gonna at myself on that one.
It's been a lot of hours. I grew up playing it. That was the first competitive shooter I got into, and I think there are many flaws with it, but I also think they did it very well to begin with.
I would tend to
Yeah.
agree with that. I actually have just gotten into CS:GO, obviously because you showed it to me, and we've been playing a little bit. I played a couple matches by myself, and it was a blast. Actually,
I thoroughly enjoy it.
I thoroughly enjoy it as well now, and I got like a quad kill one time. It was a ton of fun. It's way different than Valorant in my opinion. It's almost like different ends of the spectrum. You can like run a little bit and like move a little bit in Valorant, but in CS:GO you have to stay immediately still. And how fast the reticle snaps back in CS:GO, I actually like way more than how Valorant has a very delayed one.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's just the Valorant definitely punishes you more for moving, if that makes sense.
It punishes
mean-
you more in a different way.
Oh, I
Yeah, I
also
would say,
hate
yeah.
random stupid spray. I hate random spray.
Yeah, it's kind of obnoxious when you spray with a Vandal and it like you're going up and then all of a sudden it jumps around and you're like, why'd you do that? I didn't do that last
the way
time.
I described it this week when we were playing it was I was like, CS:GO feels like you're maybe firing an actual bullet. I mean, it takes a couple bullets to like if you're thinking of like muzzle flash, it takes a couple bullets to kill somebody in the game. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, what video game is gonna be like, you got shot with one bullet, you're dead.
Headshots.
I mean, that's the odds.
Headshots,
it.
yeah.
But in in Valorant, it feels more like you're firing like lasers or something, where it's like,
Yeah.
it does
Yeah, I'd
does
agree with that.
damage, but like
I
It-
would.
It feels a lot more like, especially even the sounds of the game feel more like you are shooting something.
I would also say the like I thought trigger tapping in CS:GO was way more like just straight up way more intuitive than in Valorant because I still don't do it in Valorant and I've caught myself doing it.
That's
a
almost the
lot
exact
more
same
in
thing that's
CS:GO.
happened to me. Is I have also been tap firing. I don't know why.
Me neither. I just
It's not a
it's
skill
way
that
better.
I have developed from Valorant,
yeah.
but
So-
it's
I think that goes when I was bringing you guys into Counter Strike. The thing I told Colin first was that I believe a lot of skills in Counter Strike can be transferred into Valorant very easily, but to transfer them from Valorant to Counter Strike is a very difficult thing because of the way the game works.
Hmm.
Like spray patterns are actually a thing. Like there is a basic spray pattern in Valorant where you just kind of pull down and it'll go there. That's kind of the way it goes.
and I would
but-
say like in CS:GO as we've discussed, people like research that. I'm sure people research
Mhm.
how it works in Valorant as well.
Yeah.
Which
Oh,
is,
yeah.
harder to calculate, obviously. But that is something in an FPS I will never spend the time to do. All of my 90% of my Valorant and CS:GO gameplay is based on subconscious muscle reactions.
Yeah, just
So
what
like
you're
obviously,
doing.
obviously, I know in my head because I've been yelled at for doing it. Don't move when you fire in Valorant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. I still do it anyway, but like it's like everything I do is less so I'm like thinking about it and being like, I'm gonna make this conscious adjustment. I'm going to, start pulling down on the mouse more when I'm spraying or whatever. And more so just, okay, I got a kill is the last time I got this. Here's how this weapon feels. And here's where a person is I'm gonna fire.
So also to take it back to a point we actually made earlier, the movement in Valorant compared to CS:GO, with like, so in my experience in close range for CS:GO and Valorant, it's beneficial to move a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
Especially if you're using SMGs in either game.
Yeah, SMGs or like high fire rate guns or just even pistols. My main problem with Valorant is you can be farther away and move a good bit and still get kills.
Yeah.
I think they should punish you actually more when you're like it should give it like a crazy spread when you move.
And I think the reason Valorant went with this is to kind of get away from the Counter-Strike mentality of like, stop.
I mean, it is a different game, so I do respect them for changing it.
I think that if they were to start doing things like that, they would end up becoming just another CS:GO where yeah, there are very similar games.
I mean,
Like there are many similarities between those games.
so
But they're very different.
is
in their own
becoming
style.
is becoming a CS:GO a bad thing though? Wasn't CS:GO like a really big hit?
I mean, it's even it was a big hit in Counter-Strike Source. Go's kind of died out
Well,
a
yeah.
little bit, especially since Valorant's come out.
Yeah.
And I think you're right that becoming like CS:GO is not a bad thing, but I think it's something they're trying to avoid at the moment.
Yeah.
While
and-
they're kind of just like when they came out, people were thinking like, oh, another Counter-Strike
yeah,
clone,
it's just
or
another Counter-Strike, yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely think putting in abilities versus just like utility is interesting, and obviously having to buy armor and different things is definitely a different way of looking at it. But I do like CS:GO. Like, I like it a lot. It's
Also, you do have to buy armor in Counter-Strike, just so you know.
Do you?
Yeah, you've just been playing casual with us. And
Oh!
competitive, you have to buy armor.
Okay.
And, diffuser
I will
kit.
say, in one of the first games we played in Counter Strike, it was a casual match. I bought the AWP, AWP. That's how it's spelled. I got like 3 kills in a row,
Yeah.
which, I mean, one doesn't seem impressive for a Counter Strike. But if you look at any of my gameplay with the operator from Valorant, you will know that that is freaking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
And that is,
so
for me, unheard of. I'll get a
there-
lucky shot every now and then, but like, I
So
don't- it's
there's
very
actually a
different gun.
reason for that. It started out much more like the op in Counter Strike. The operator and if you remember back in the original beta, it was very much you could get like 3Ks easily with the op. However, they've kind of had to change it because in Counter Strike, everyone has the same util. They have the smokes, flashes,
Yeah.
molly, stuff like that. Where in Valorant, you don't have that. Not everyone does. So they've had to change the operator in Valorant and like worsen it in a way to make it harder for that people to just get easy 3Ks every round because they didn't have a smoker.
Well, I mean, and that's, I mean, thankfully that has happened because I mean, maybe not thankfully. It is a different game, and they're clearly making conscious efforts to avoid becoming Counter Strike, which, as we discussed, not a horrible thing, but they'd want to be their own thing, which is a bold choice, and they are continuing that. I will say, people in Counter Strike, it seems like everybody buys an op,
Yeah.
whereas in Valorant,
Well,
every now and again you'll get like 2 people on a team with an op. It's very rare that like more than 2 people on a team will have an op. Whereas, I mean, granted, we're playing casual when there's 10 people.
in competitive,
but-
it's not as common.
So
Okay.
I'm sure it's less common in competitive. Obviously, it's going to be a harder game mode. But I've personally, like, with the op in AWP in Counter-Strike, I can reposition and, like, go back into a shot pretty well with the AWP, but with the operator, it's almost impossible for me.
Yeah. It's a lot. It goes back to the movement thing that you talked about, where in Counter-Strike, once you stop, your reticle closes back to its normal, like,
Snaps.
Almost
Right
snaps
there.
back in,
where
yeah.
in Valorant it takes a second or two, where in that time someone with a Vandal or
You're
someone with
dead.
another op, you're gone.
Yeah. And I was actually being pinned down with people on this jungle map, and there's this one line sight. I backed all the way up because they were rushing me, and I just got one as they came around the corner, and I got another one, and I zoomed back in, and then I flipped around and no-scoped somebody, and I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think they should change the unzoomed in. So when you shoot the AWP in CS:GO, it's almost a direct line when you're standing still. I think they
It's a
should
bit
change
off, but pretty good. Yeah,
change
I
that
think you're right.
in Valorant to have a more direct bullet when you're standing still.
Yeah, the operator in Valorant is very hard to get anything without the scope.
Well, yeah,
on.
exactly. I mean, that's what I've experienced in Valorant is I will I'll try my because I know obviously in the back of my head, if you move with the operator, you're screwed. If you move with other guns in the game, as long as you're
Mhm.
somewhat on target and maybe you're careful, and moving slowly, you'll be able to compensate and get the kill. With the op, I've missed shots while standing still, not because of like not aiming at them. I'll be aiming at them and it'll go like to the right, and I'm like,
Yeah, no, I
I
get
don't
that.
think I was moving, but like,
And if you guys remember back in the beta days, I mainly used an operator.
That's
Like
true.
that's what I would use,
Yeah,
but I can't use it anymore.
yeah.
Like even when we just goof off, I can never get kills with it. I'll
Yeah.
buy it and then immediately realize I can't use it.
I tend to use it on defense just because I can get kills for like holding angles.
Yeah.
Past that, I usually have a Vandal that I can pick up.
Yeah, I end up using the Marshall more because it feels more.
Oh, I love the
It
Marshall
feels
actually.
It's what I think the operator should kind of take a little bit from.
It's
Like, it
way
should be a
more
slower
consistent.
Marshall is what I think it should be. Just like in Counter-Strike, is the Scout's a faster op.
Yeah.
Like I think that's a good thing I'd enjoy seeing in Valorant. Just better snipers.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, even though there's obviously people who use them to an extent and like are very, very good with them.
Yeah.
But I also think it would be fun to change up the meta. It's been stale for a couple months. But they actually just changed the Icebox map. I went into a casual the other day, and the Icebox map, there's like another wall now. They changed it a ton. And I think we're going to go on to our third candidate. It's going to be my time. And Colin actually brought it up already. It's obviously
I knew it. I
Destiny
knew it.
2.
You gave me a
And
look, I
Destiny.
went,
It's
"Oh,
the
man,
whole
I just
universe. Yeah,
I was worried
Colin
that
just calling us all out.
I know,
I
right?
know. I was worried. I actually was worried that David. I couldn't actually tell because I didn't hear the start of what you were describing when you were talking about Titanfall. And I was like, "Is this his pick?" And I was like, "Did I call out both of their picks in the first like 10 minutes?"
Pretty
Oh,
much,
shit.
yeah.
Yeah, I said that I had the same thing you do normally, where I had 2 picks.
It's
So,
a Colin special.
Yeah.
So Destiny, Liam.
Don't, dude. Destiny is a expansive world. It's so. There are like 3 different ways you can play Destiny. There's a main storyline. There is raiding and expansive dungeons that you can do, and higher end content, and there's PvP, which is all 3 of them are a godsend. The Bungie has made a fantastic world and a fantastic game to play. The combat in that game is so on point, it's ridiculous. It's obviously not as intensive as like a CS:GO or a Valorant, but it's so much fun, and it's like almost like Halo mixed with a like hero battler. It's so you obviously somebody who hasn't played Destiny, you basically get these abilities from the light, from the Traveler, which is all like basically a god from space, without spoiling anything. And you use those abilities to fight the darkness. That's the main thing in the story. You're fighting the darkness. And with these abilities, you get to fight against the creatures of the darkness in basically a PvE arena. So you can like fight different monsters, and there's a ton of different guns. There's even like different rarities of guns, so it's a looter shooter as well. It's touching so many different parts of gaming that I love that I couldn't not buy it. And I've been playing since literally the beta of Destiny 1. I remember getting it on my PS3 and playing it non-stop with my brother. It was so much fun. It was ridiculous.
I will say, when the first ads or whatever came out for Destiny 1, that is, and they were talking about, or maybe I just heard through like a Game Informer or something that like it came from the light and the bad part was the darkness. I was like, what the hell is this? This is like the laziest story writing ever.
Yeah.
Like, well, the good guys are the light side and the bad guys are the dark side. What are their powers from? Oh, the light and the dark. Whoa, it's just Star Wars. So like, essentially, I was like, well, this seems kind of, I don't know. I will say I've only played Destiny 2. I will say Liam and I have very different outlooks on the PvP. I think it falls slightly into the trap of Call of Duty, where certain things kind of there can't be a meta, right? Is there like certain weapons will always for
There's
the most part.
definitely. So I'm gonna cut in just because I don't know if you've played a lot of the competitive of Destiny 1 or 2, and there's at some point you will see the meta. There are guns that will kill faster in the PvP scene just because the meta's better. The sandbox changed. They are the better guns for the season. That's honestly Bungie's been dealing with a lot of backlash and how unbalanced the game can be. Some people want to use a certain gun and they can't because it's not the best.
I think that's. I mean, maybe it's because I wouldn't consult. I'm trying to like place what I would consider myself as in terms of player base. I wouldn't say I'm like a novice.
I would say you're
I
casual.
wouldn't say I'm. Okay, I would agree with that. The biggest issue I have is, especially going from games like Valorant, where the difference in what's happening is based entirely on player skill. Whereas in Destiny, it's kind of a mixture. Where like Valorant, everyone is given the same weapons. Every weapon does the same thing for each person. The only thing that changes is like a skin or the character. Whereas in Destiny, I feel like it's like, well, yeah, some players are going to be better regardless, but also, it's hard to place myself because everyone's doing something different, and all different people are going to have the game differently if they're playing with different weapons. It would be interesting, and this would never happen, to play against someone with like the exact same loadout. And that is the point of the game, right? Is having a different loadout will give you an advantage. And that's perfectly fine, and I understand that. But for me, it is a game that I get extremely tilted at very quickly, and I honestly don't know why.
Yeah, so
And maybe it's just because I'm bad, and I'm bad because bad.
I wouldn't
But
consider you
also,
bad
I
in the
just
game.
and I just feel like every time I hop in the game, I'm just very weak. And maybe it's just because I play a Warlock most of the time, but I always feel like I'm just getting my ass kicked.
So, I would say so the looter shooter does come into effect. You do have to have certain guns to be competitive. If you want to play competitive Destiny 2 in like PvP sense, PvP or PvE, you definitely have to have certain guns because certain guns will be better. Such as there will be like 3 different loadouts or a couple different loadouts for PvP high-end content that you'll see people use. And that's where you get like that's player skill at that point because they're the same weapons going against the same weapons. As you were saying, it comes down to who can who can hit their shots, who can throw down abilities, who can use their shields better, who can use their character or the height better. And I do have to say I've been playing the game for so long that I know when to use my abilities. I know how the hitboxes work. I know how the game's engine works very well, and I know the little tricks and the different things like that, like how you can slide under barriers very well, and how you can hit So a fun thing in Destiny 1 and 2, you have perfect aim when you're hip firing usually. So even if you no scope and jump, you can usually kill somebody while you're doing that. And if a lot of people that are better at PvP can actually slide into a room and get a headshot and continue running, like with a sniper. And I'm obviously not that good, but some people are.
I will say some of the most fun I've had in specifically PvP in the game. Obviously, I will say the raid was really fun. We did the Leviathan raid together.
I forced him into it.
Which, like, I wanted to do that for a while, ever since I had gotten the game. And I definitely think I leaned more towards the PvE side of things.
I definitely do as well. Yeah.
Though I will say my favorite game mode in PvP. I'm not gonna say Mayhem because that's
Mayhem's
fun.
a ton of fun.
For a while, it took me a while to find this in Overwatch, but there's custom games that are 500%. Your ult recharges immediately, and they're just. I love them to death. They're chaos.
Yeah,
it's so much fun.
You
I
get
love
to
Mayhem,
use...
but I will say the most fun, my second favorite PvP mode in Destiny is survival.
Oh.
Just because it's very it gets closer to Valorant.
Yeah.
But also it just, the regular PvP matches, I feel like there's just too many people in them.
So
I feel like a 3v3 match is the way it should be.
So it's a 6v6 in for David. I don't think you've played it. So
I have not, no.
For Control, it's a 6v6. Obviously, it's a little bit more people than you'd like. It is fun if you're really good at PvP. You can like get the whole team down with like one shot, and you get a lot of medals and everything. It's a ton of fun. But it does get overwhelming if everybody's good. And they do have skill-based matchmaking during the seasons, but when no season's up, they actually get rid of that, so you can so the higher-end people can dick around in casuals, basically. But something that you haven't actually tried is the actual super competitive side of PvP, Colin. It's called Trials of Osiris, which they've actually had a really hard time with bot prevention in Destiny 2 recently, just because it is just a free-to-play game at this point. But they did fix that this season, and I'm looking to almost try to get back into it with PvP, just to try it out again, because I did it a lot in Destiny 1 and early Destiny 2. But I love competitive PvP. It's a ton of fun, and it's definitely rewarding when you do win. So how you get the ultimate reward, which is going to the Lighthouse of Osiris and getting a chest full of loot, is getting 7 wins in a row without a failure. Which, I mean, it's hard. It's honestly hard. You have to try again and again, but once you do get it, it's freaking phenomenal. And I think
say that's the thing Destiny does really well is payoffs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Not necessarily obviously I'm bitter about just loot in general.
Always.
It just makes me angry sometimes. But that's the thing they do really well is they know how to make it worth it a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because you'll do something and then they'll be just the grandiose sometimes is that I will say that is the best part of Destiny is they do grandiose things very well. We spent 3 hours in a freaking lobby waiting for fucking comets to fall out of the sky.
Exactly. That was so much fun.
Cool, but also just I don't think any other game would be able to do that other than Fortnite at this point.
Yeah. So there was an in-game live event, kind of like Fortnite did, where the Sunbreaker or whatever, a giant spaceship, Almighty, spaceship that was gonna blow up the sun gets blown up and falls to Earth. Ton of fun to see. Check it out on YouTube if you need to. Really cool event. They'll speed it up in YouTube. It's worth it to watch on YouTube. It wasn't extremely worth to watch in person, but it was a fun thing to have a community.
When we had just 4 hours free on the afternoon of like a
it was fun.
We were just like,
I guess.
not? Let's just sit in the tower and not do anything.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. But I do have to say, Bungie is very, very good at making very big and expansive worlds that make you gobsmacked, that give you an awe and let you look at this world and think, wow, I think that could be out there, and I think that could exist in our world, and I think it would be fun to reach it. And definitely their artists have made beautiful skyboxes and beautiful terrain to look at, because it's a amazing looking game, especially all the raids and everything like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, to go into the raids, the PvE side of it, since we talked at length about the PvP, the PvE, basically you start at dungeons, which are basically you fight through a bunch of ads to fight a end boss, which then you take down, and there's a loot chest that pops. Raids are multiple encounter scenarios, such as the Leviathan as an example. You go through a spaceship, which is called the Leviathan. Leviathan, the World Eater. It's a giant spaceship that eats worlds and suns, and you're going through it to fight the captain of the ship. And when you get through the whole thing, you hit four encounters in the beginning, and then one last boss. And the last boss, once you kill him, it shoots loot everywhere. You get a ton of things, and you get to play with his corpse, which is a ton of fun because he's a robot.
That's primarily what I mean when I say worth it, because they do have on certain planets they've got escalation protocol, which essentially if you stick with something for long enough, it will give you just like something really cool. It'll give you an exotic, and so the raids are a perfect example of that. Where yes, so maybe this is my issue with PvP, is there is no payoff for that. For me, getting my butt whipped and trying as hard as I can.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily getting a whole lot of it. The raid, when we have to go through the freaking gauntlet 7 different times, start over, wipe.
William yelling at you.
When we have to go through it so many times, there is a payoff at the end, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yep.
PvP, it's kind of just like, well, I'm just getting my butt kicked in. Like every now and then, I'll be like, that was a cool kill. I'm like, we won. But at the same time, it's like compared to the raid, where you're like, man, it took us like 3 hours, but we finally did it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what happened.
And that's why I honestly want you to try out the competitive PvP, which it does have that light at the end of the tunnel. It's actually called a lighthouse, which is funny. And once you get there, it gives you loot that you can only get there and nowhere else in the game, and it's just wonderful. And same with the raid. It's a very high end content that you can only get certain loot there, and it's very unique. And you start carrying around that gun that is from the raid. That everybody knows that you got it in the raid now, and it's a ton of fun when you do that. Obviously, to get the experience and different things like that, and have me yell at you because I'm raid leading, and I'm very angry when I'm raid leading.
And before I ever played Destiny, I played a decent amount of Warframe, which I think they get compared a lot.
Yes, they do.
I would say they're very similar, just kind of in layout and design. Honestly, because I would say Destiny's definitely a higher quality game.
I would say
a lot of thought is put into it. It's a lot just I wouldn't say Warframe's not thought out, but it seems cheaper, which mainly because it was free to play for basically forever.
Well, one's a AAA game, one's an indie game, so it's hard to compare them, but they are similar. Oh,
He's gone again.
He's gone again. Okay, so David, what do you think about Destiny 2? Have you heard about it before?
I've heard about it. I've not
They
gotten a
both-
chance to play it. However, yeah, you were gone. We're on a different thing. It's fine. Anyway, I had a question for you, or not a question, but I wanted to touch on something you brought up.
Yeah.
You mentioned you knew the engine and how to use it to get better movement and stuff like that.
For sure, yeah.
And I think that's something that I linked actually back to Counter-Strike first with there's basically a grate and a couple of the maps that if you jump at the correct pathing, you can go straight through it and act as if you never slowed down.
Oh,
Gives you a huge advantage in that game.
yeah.
But there's another thing called bee hopping, which I'm sure you guys have heard.
Yeah.
And something that I've noticed that Valorant doesn't really have is that kind of learning movement better, except for 3 operators. There's nothing for me to learn Brimstone wise that would make me have an advantage if I moved in a different way.
So I can actually come into that from a very noob point of view. For the first time I came into that one map we were playing earlier, me, you, and Colin. I don't remember the name of the map, but
Dust 2 probably.
Yeah, Dust 2. Basically, you go out and on B site, there's this car that you can jump onto, and if you jump onto the car, you can hit a ledge on a box and jump onto the top of the box.
Yeah,
I immediately did that, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I sat up there and I got 3 kills because the guy didn't see me.
Yeah, so with that, there's another thing that I then related it to. So when I was a kid, I watched competitive Counter-Strike just because it was fun. It was
Yeah.
high school, not kid. Anyway, there's a great game with one of the teams, I can't remember, but they did a 3-man stack where 2 people sat on top of each other, which is normal. That's
Yeah.
A-okay. The game engine is fine with it. A third person, however, getting on top, not okay. The game kicks them off. However, they figured out if they sat in a specific corner, they could see over the wall into the other site, and they won the entire round because of that, because they just got kills from this absurd spot. And I think I've started seeing that in Valorant with some Jet mains who have been able to use their boosts to launch them straight into the air pretty much.
I
And
really
I've enjoyed that a lot.
To go at that point, I really like how Icebox does have that one little ramp. Even though it's kind of cheap, you can get up onto that ramp. I do think the verticality in Valorant is harder to notice just because of how focused the FOV is. Speaking from a
And
person...
I think it's interesting that, I think me and Liam have multiple times just kind of ranted about that one specific spot on that map, just why the hell is that a thing? Which is weird because you'd think after a couple weeks, everybody should know that spot.
Yeah.
Everybody should immediately be ready to just headshot anybody who comes on there. But that's the weird thing about Valorant is as much as you know those spots or as much as you expect people to be in those spots, you're never ready for it.
Nope.
And I think at a very high competitive level you probably are. But for whatever reason, I'm sure I will continue to get killed from that spot. And I don't know why that is, whether it's because just they place them in places that are almost always highly populated, so you're concentrating on threats lower down, and that is a in terms of target
Non-consistent
acquisition-
threat.
In
Yeah.
terms of target acquisition, that's lower on the list.
Yeah.
And I would say that's 90% of Valorant is target acquisition. If
Oh,
you
for
can-
sure.
If you can pick out who to shoot first, you will win most engagements. Because I feel like that's where a lot of people get trapped, is when there's 2 people pushing them and they're just I don't know what to do. And they freeze up, or they try and shoot both. And I know I've done that before, is try and go back and forth. And you're that's just focus one down and then focus another one down.
All right.
So that is, there is definitely a lot of stress.
Since we spent a lot of time talking about the games, I'm going to go into our little comparisons quickly. Since we're getting a little bit long in the tooth with this one. So we actually did a great job picking very different games, each of us. Obviously, David picked CSGO, a very stringent team-based, very competitive game, and I picked a very looter shooter MMO, like you can do this, you can do that, you can really do whatever you want. And Colin picked a very movement focused mech battler, almost craziness game, almost like a Call of Duty with mechs, but a lot
I
better.
think that's basically what it is.
A lot better movement, I would say. But yeah, it's just from all different perspectives. The main attractive thing is the whole game engine, the engine that you use to shoot people in, the how the bullets interact with the models, and how you get like a feel of it. And I honestly can consider that the main attraction to looter shooters. To like, if the gunplay feels good, you will have a decent game. It might not be a great game, but it'll be a decent one.
I think that's what we spent most of the time talking about, actually, is more than anything game feel, and that includes movement, that includes how guns work.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're right. In all of these different games, guns, and just the game feels very different. And part of that is the engine, but part of that is also, partially like what the lore is a little bit.
Yeah.
Where the movement in Destiny is maybe slightly slower than as we did this my imaginary scale. Different from like maybe it's a little bit slower than Titanfall, but that's because it's supposed to be like a little bit more mystical, like a little bit more magical, like
so
something else is going
I
on.
would say it's consistently faster. I would say in certain aspects it can speed up very quickly. Like it's instead of a linear line, kind of like how Valorant is. I would say Destiny is more of a ebb and flow. You get high points, you get low points, especially with like a hunter's dodge. You can dodge out of things very quickly, or you can slide into different things, or the Titans have actually a barricade that they could shoot up and just run away.
And so, based on the lore, right, yours, as I said, a little bit more mystical. Titanfall, obviously, a little bit more like futuristic combat. You can stick to walls.
They can
And then
jump around.
David's is just like
they're also highly
people
trained
are fighting a war, maybe in the Middle East. We're not really sure. There's kind of it's a global offensive.
Yeah, they're somewhere.
And they're real guns. It's a real thing that's happening. Here's how real people move.
Most people can go the same speed.
Yeah.
I mean, all three of us could probably stand on top of each other if we tried really hard.
Yeah.
It
It wouldn't be
hard, though,
fun.
and one of us would probably kick the other off.
David,
Yeah,
you'd be on
too.
top for sure.
Yeah, that's I'll
I make
take
a
that.
good base.
Yeah. Is that what your mom told you?
Yeah. Every morning for 20 years.
Nice. Alright. But yeah, it's definitely really about the game feel for me, especially for a FPS. Because it affects how you can get used to the guns, and how obviously you can get kills and get that gratification that you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you were talking about how the lore almost affects how the world builds around it, and I would say it definitely has a little bit about that, but I also think the developer has a very stringent way of like the way they want to feel, because we haven't talked about this, but Destiny 2 does feel a lot like old school Halo, which Bungie created Halo as well. So it's definitely goes with the developer, how they make games and how they develop engines.
And one, if not several, of Respawn Entertainment, the Titanfall people. That's a little tagline. Came from Call of Duty.
Oh, for sure.
So
that
was for a reason that was a selling point at some point, I think, where they're like,
oh
you came from Call of Duty, and you're like, wow.
yeah, good I guess.
And then what else has Counter Strike is Valve, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they've done-
Yeah, it's Valve. I mainly Counter Strike. Then
Is that why there's no new one?
Half-Life. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to take that shot.
Understandable.
But yeah, it definitely does go with the developer, really. My main problem with Destiny 2 is it's not very user-friendly. Such as you were saying, you get very frustrated the fact that you don't have enough time to dedicate to Destiny 2 because you don't have the weapons you want,
I will say that Destiny, very time hungry game.
Well, it's obviously that goes into it. It is a looter shooter at its core. It's not like a Valorant. It's not like what's it called? It's not a
Titanfall.
Jumpy mech game, as I was gonna say. Titanfall.
Jumpy mech game was the working title. Before.
Yes, I know. But yeah, it's definitely more of a time sink than most of those games.
Yeah.
Which does appeal to me. I do like grinding things. That is one of my things that I do like, and we will get to that category of kind of grindy games that I like at some point. But yeah, thanks for showing up for Rat Chat number 3, guys. Colin, always a pleasure. David, always a pleasure. This week's of FPS went quite well. We had a ton of fun talking about, obviously, Titanfall, Destiny 2, and CSGO. Feel free to catch me on my weekly stream with Colin on Wednesdays, and maybe some Monday Madness at some point. Always at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, Valorant Wednesday. So much fun. We did talk about Valorant this week. And yeah, catch us around, guys. Every Sunday we stream the Rat Chat, so be prepared for episode 4 next week. You guys have a great night, and stay safe out there.